She stood small in the crowd, unnoticed, almost invisible. A little black girl, watching as the world turned its back on another child. A child who carried a silence not by choice but by birth, the deaf daughter of a billionaire. People laughed, whispered, and ignored her, as if her voice didn't matter, as if her presence meant nothing. But the little girl saw everything. And when she finally stepped forward, what she revealed left the room frozen. How could someone so young expose a truth that even the powerful couldn't hide? It was just another afternoon, the kind that passed without notice for most. The little black girl, bright-eyed and curious, loved exploring places far bigger than her world at home. She had grown used to being overlooked, her small frame blending into the background, her voice rarely asked for or heard. Yet she carried within her a quiet strength, an instinct to notice what others ignored. That day she found herself inside a grand hall filled with polished marble floors, chandeliers, and people dressed in wealth. It was the kind of place where power spoke louder than kindness, and where silence often hid cruelty. To her, everything felt overwhelming, yet strangely revealing. She could sense that something wasn't right, that beneath the luxury and laughter, an unspoken truth was unfolding before her eyes. She didn't know it yet, but what she was about to witness would test not only her courage, but also the conscience of everyone in that room. The room sparkled with wealth, yet its heart was cold. Laughter echoed off the marble walls, glasses clinked, and chandeliers bathed the hall in golden light. But in the middle of it all sat a young girl, the deaf daughter of the billionaire, quiet, isolated, and invisible to the very people surrounding her. Guests brushed past her as if she wasn't even there, their conversations rising with arrogance while their eyes carefully avoided hers. To them, she was a shadow in a world built on status and sound. The little black girl saw it all. She noticed how adults shifted uncomfortably when the deaf child tried to communicate. She noticed how even the servers moved quickly past her chair, pretending not to see her hands move in desperate gestures. Some guests even chuckled quietly, mocking the way she waved and signed, like her silence was entertainment. Each moment cut deeper, and the young observer, though small and often overlooked herself, felt anger rise in her chest. She knew what it meant to be ignored, to be judged before anyone even bothered to listen. But here, in this dazzling hall of power, that same injustice unfolded on a grand stage, cruel, shameless, and unchecked. Then it escalated. A group of wealthy children, dressed in fine clothes, circled the deaf girl's table. They whispered, giggled, and mimicked her movements. One boy exaggerated clumsy hand motions while another covered his ears, pretending not to hear. The adults nearby did nothing. Some even smiled uncomfortably as if the cruelty were just childish mischief. The deaf girl's eyes lowered, her shoulders sinking as the laughter grew louder. The silence around her wasn't just her own. It was a silence forced upon her by indifference. And still, no one came to her side. But in the corner of the hall, the little black girl clenched her fists. Her heart pounded as she watched a moment that felt far too familiar. She had lived through the sting of exclusion, the weight of being dismissed because of who she was. And now, she stood at a crossroads. She could remain invisible like the others, or she could step forward and risk the eyes of the powerful turning on her. The air grew heavier. The taunts of the children rang louder. And in that moment, one question burned inside her. Would she stay silent like the rest? Or would she become the voice that silence could no longer contain? The laughter reached its peak, cruel and unrelenting, bouncing through the grand hall like a weapon. The deaf daughter sat frozen, her hands trembling in midair as she tried once more to sign, desperate for someone, anyone, to understand. But her movements were drowned in mockery, her silence twisted into entertainment for those who should have protected her. That was the breaking point. The little black girl stepped forward, her small frame moving through the sea of indifference. The room seemed to hush, not out of respect, but out of confusion. What could a child like her possibly do? Yet she kept walking, eyes fixed on the girl who had been abandoned in plain sight. And then she lifted her own hands. Slowly, confidently, she began to speak in the language no one else had bothered to learn. Her fingers moved with clarity, each sign carrying weight, each gesture breaking through the wall of silence. The deaf girl's eyes widened, filling with tears. For the first time that evening, she was not alone. Someone had seen her. Someone had listened. The crowd stood stunned. The mocking children stopped mid-laugh, their smirks fading into shame. Even the adults, with all their wealth and pride, were struck silent as they realized what had just happened. That the smallest, most overlooked voice in the room had spoken the loudest truth. In that moment, power shifted. It wasn't the billionaire's money or the glittering chandeliers that defined the room anymore. It was the courage of a child who dared to stand against cruelty. And as the two girls locked eyes, hands moving in unison, one question lingered in the stunned silence. How could those with so much fail to see what the smallest among them had carried all along? The moment passed, but its weight lingered in the air. The billionaire's daughter, once abandoned in her silence, now stood illuminated by the simple courage of another child. The little black girl hadn't come with power, wealth, or influence, only the willingness to see what others refused to, and that was enough to shatter the indifference of an entire room. Yet when the chandeliers dimmed and the guests returned to their lives, the truth remained. It should not have taken a child to reveal humanity. The mockery, the silence, the refusal to acknowledge dignity, these were not accidents. They were choices, born from the same blindness that fuels racism, ableism, and every form of injustice. For the little black girl, the moment changed her forever. She learned that courage often means standing alone, that compassion can be louder than cruelty, and that silence, whether chosen or imposed, is never the absence of a voice, only the absence of someone willing to listen. But the story is bigger than her. It's about how often society ignores those who don't fit its narrow standards, whether by race, disability, or difference. How many more children must carry the weight of doing what adults refuse to do? How many times must dignity be mocked before humanity finally learns to see? Because at the end of the night, one thing was clear. Injustice doesn't end when the laughter stops. It ends when enough of us refuse to look away. So the question is, when the moment comes, will you stay silent like the crowd? Or will you be the one who steps forward?